Have you ever looked up at the night sky and felt a sense of profound, quiet awe? A feeling of being small in the face of an immense and ancient universe? Now, imagine looking up at that same sky, but instead of serene darkness, you see it begin to burn. Imagine the very air around you turning into a furnace, and the ground beneath your feet shaking with a violence that signals the end of the world. This isn't a scene from a science fiction movie. This was the reality for the last dinosaurs 66 million years ago. The world on the morning of that fateful day was a masterpiece of evolution, a planet teeming with life forged over 150 million years of reptilian rule. In the lush, humid floodplains of North America, a Tyrannosaurus rex, a 40-foot-long predator at the apex of its food chain, surveyed its kingdom. The air, thick with the scent of cycads and damp earth, carried the low, guttural calls of a herd of triceratops grazing nearby, their formidable horns a clear warning to any who dared approach. High above, gigantic pterosaurs like the Quetzalcoatlus, with wingspans rivaling a small airplane, soared on thermal updrafts, casting fleeting shadows on the world below. It was a world of giants, a vibrant and dynamic ecosystem, a planet breathing in blissful ignorance of its imminent doom. But high above this verdant stage, beyond the blue veil of the atmosphere, a visitor was arriving. It was not a gentle guest. For millennia, it had traveled through the void of space, a 6-mile-wide mountain of rock and metal, an emissary of cosmic violence. To any creature on Earth that might have noticed it in the preceding days, it was just a faint, unremarkable speck of light growing imperceptibly brighter. They had no concept of orbital mechanics, no understanding of the physics that had sealed their fate. They could not know that this speck was the Chicxulub impactor, a silent executioner traveling at more than 40 times the speed of sound, aimed squarely at a shallow sea in what we now call the Yucatán Peninsula. We often think of the dinosaurs' extinction as a single, devastating event, a cosmic bullseye, but the truth is infinitely more terrifying. The asteroid's impact was not the end. It was merely the beginning. It was the trigger for a relentless, cascading series of cataclysms that transformed a paradise into a global inferno in less than 24 hours. The initial blast was only the first chapter of a story written in fire, flood, earthquake, and darkness. To understand what truly happened, we must slow down time and become witnesses to the day the world changed forever. This is the story of that day, the scientific breakdown of the first 24 hours of hell on Earth. The countdown to annihilation was measured in the final, fleeting moments of a world that had no idea it was about to die. As the Chicxulub asteroid plunged through the upper atmosphere, it ceased to be a mere rock and became a cosmic entity of pure destruction. Traveling at over 45,000 miles per hour, it compressed the air before it into a blinding, superheated sheath of plasma, a searing bubble of gas hotter than the surface of the sun. On the ground, for any creature that happened to glance skyward, it would have appeared as if a hole was being burned into the very fabric of the heavens, a silent, terrifying omen of fire. Then, at time zero, it struck. The asteroid slammed into the shallow, sulfur-rich sea off the coast of the Yucatán Peninsula, unleashing an energy that beggars the imagination. The force of the impact was equivalent to the simultaneous detonation of more than 10 billion atomic bombs, a blast so powerful it is arguably the most violent single event to occur on this planet in the last half-billion years. In less than a second, the entire 6-mile-wide asteroid and a massive chunk of the Earth's crust beneath it nearly 20 miles deep were not just shattered, but instantly vaporized. A mountain of rock, and the very ground it hit, ceased to exist, transformed into a plume of incandescent gas and molten debris that blasted a temporary hole clean through the atmosphere and surged into the blackness of space. The first messenger of this apocalypse was a silent flash of thermal radiation. Spreading at the speed of light, this pulse of intense heat instantly incinerated everything for hundreds of miles in every direction. The lush forests, the prowling Tyrannosaurus, the grazing herds of Edmontosaurus, life within this kill zone was turned to ash before the sound of the explosion even had a chance to cross the horizon. Then came the physical blast wave, a wall of supersonic pressure that radiated outwards, flattening the landscape with absolute authority. It was a wave that didn't just topple trees, it atomized them. It didn't just kill dinosaurs, it ripped their bodies apart. But the planet itself was now reeling. The impact delivered a hammer blow not just to the surface, but to the tectonic plates below, triggering the mother of all earthquakes. Estimated to have exceeded magnitude 11 on the Richter scale, it was a seismic event thousands of times more powerful than anything modern humans have ever recorded. This wasn't just a tremor, it was a planetary convulsion. The ground itself began to behave like a fluid, with seismic waves radiating across continents, causing the land to ripple and heave in waves hundreds of feet high. In North America, the ground shook so violently that lakes and rivers sloshed back and forth in enormous standing waves, a phenomenon known as a seiche, instantly drowning any creatures near their shores. The earth was ringing like a bell, a deep, resonant groan that signaled the profound wounding of a world. Within minutes of the impact, as the very ground of the planet continued to shudder violently, a new horror was born from the sea. The asteroid had gouged a crater over 100 miles wide and 20 miles deep, displacing an unfathomable volume of water. The ocean, first blasted away from the impact site, now rushed back to fill the void, only to be violently thrown back out in a catastrophic rebound. This was the birth of a megatsunami. This was not a wave, it was a moving wall of water, a liquid mountain that, near the impact site, may have reached a staggering height of nearly a mile. This monster wave raced outwards at the speed of a jetliner, its energy almost undiminished as it traversed the deep ocean. As it approached the coastlines of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, it scraped the seabed clean, gathering sediment and debris into its churning mass. When it finally made landfall, it was an unstoppable force of nature, inundating coastlines and surging hundreds of miles inland. It didn't just flood the land, it scoured it down to bedrock, a turbulent slurry of mud, rock, and the mangled remains of entire ecosystems. Any dinosaur that had somehow survived the initial heat blast and the ground-shaking terror along the coasts was now swept away in a chaotic, watery grave. Evidence of this colossal wave can still be seen today in the jumbled, chaotic rock layers found as far north as North Dakota, deposits filled with a bizarre mixture of ocean fossils and freshwater fish, a testament to the day the sea itself invaded a continent. Meanwhile, a second, even more insidious assault was beginning, one that would affect the entire planet. The material vaporized in the initial blast rock from the Earth's crust and the asteroid itself had been ejected with such force that it was thrown far above the atmosphere, on ballistic trajectories that would carry it around the globe. As gravity reasserted its pull, this superheated ejecta began to rain back down. It didn't fall as ash or dust, but as trillions upon trillions of tiny sand-sized spheres of molten glass, known as tektites and spherules. As these particles re-entered the atmosphere all over the world, the friction of their descent caused them to glow, turning the sky into a hellish, planetary-scale broiler. Imagine the entire sky, from horizon to horizon, filled with countless shooting stars, so many that they merged into a single, uniform sheet of incandescent light. This celestial light show heated the upper atmosphere to an estimated 30 degrees Fahrenheit. The radiant heat pouring down onto the surface was immense, creating oven-like conditions on a global scale. The very air became a weapon. For any animal caught in the open, there was no escape, no shade to hide in. This wasn't a fire you could outrun. The heat was everywhere. It was enough to spontaneously ignite any dry organic material, leaves, pine needles, dead wood. Within the first hour of the impact, global firestorms began to erupt. From the forests of Asia to the plains of Africa, the world was set ablaze, not by the impact itself, but by the sky that had turned to fire. The world, now caught between biblical floods and a global firestorm, was about to plunge into a new and even more enduring nightmare: darkness. The infernos raging across every continent were consuming vast swaths of forest and grassland, pumping an unimaginable quantity of soot and ash into the atmosphere. This black smoke, combined with the fine dust pulverized from the impact site itself, began to form a thick, impenetrable shroud that choked the sky. Within hours, this dark pall had spread to enshroud the entire planet. The sun, the source of all life and energy, began to dim. First, it would have appeared as a hazy red disk, as if viewed through a dense smoke filter. Then, as the layer of airborne debris thickened, it vanished entirely. Day turned into an abyssal, starless night, a darkness deeper than any natural twilight, and this unnatural night would last not for hours or days, but for months, possibly even years. With the sun completely blotted out, photosynthesis ceased almost instantly. The planet's green engine sputtered and died. Plants, the very foundation of the dinosaurs' world and the base of nearly every food chain, began to wither and die in the gloom. The darkness brought with it a crippling, inescapable cold. With no sunlight to warm the planet's surface, temperatures began to plummet. The immense heat from the re-entering tektites was a fleeting, horrific furnace, but its aftermath was a swift and brutal swing into a deep freeze. This impact winter descended with astonishing speed. Within days or weeks, global average temperatures would have dropped by as much as 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice and snow began to form in places that had never known a frost, including the once tropical latitudes. The warm, stable climate that the dinosaurs had thrived in for millions of years was gone, replaced by a harsh, unrelenting winter. As if this weren't enough, the air itself had been poisoned. The asteroid had struck a region rich in sulfur-bearing rocks like gypsum and anhydrite. The impact vaporized these rocks, releasing hundreds of billions of tons of sulfur aerosols into the stratosphere. High above the soot cloud, these sulfur compounds combined with water vapor to form vast clouds of sulfuric acid. Soon, this acid began to fall back to Earth. The rain that fell from the darkened skies was no longer life-giving water. It was a corrosive acid bath, as caustic as battery acid. It poisoned the soils, acidified the oceans, and burned the leaves of any plants that had miraculously survived the fires. This acid rain dissolved the shells of marine plankton, causing the base of the ocean's food chain to collapse just as surely as the one on land. The world was now cold, dark, and drenched in poison. For any dinosaurs that had managed to survive the initial impact, the tsunamis, the firestorms, and the immediate darkness, this new phase was a slow, grinding sentence of starvation and exposure in a toxic, frozen wasteland. In the space of a single rotation of the Earth, a vibrant, thriving world had been systematically dismantled. The first 24 hours after the Chicxulub impact were not a singular event of extinction, but a relentless gauntlet of planetary-scale torture. It began with a blow that shook the very foundations of the planet, followed by continent-drowning waves and a sky that rained fire. It descended into a suffocating darkness that starved the light, which in turn gave way to a punishing global winter and rains of corrosive acid. This wasn't a quick death. For the vast majority of life on Earth, it was a protracted and agonizing end in a world that had become utterly alien and hostile. The great dinosaurs, the mighty Tyrannosaurus, the majestic Triceratops, the armored Ankylosaurus were doomed. Their size, their metabolism, their dependence on a lush, productive ecosystem all became fatal liabilities in this new, broken world. The reign of the dinosaurs, an epic spanning 150 million years, was effectively ended in a day. The rulers of the Earth were reduced to fossils in waiting, their demise a stark testament to the terrifying power of cosmic chance. But destruction, in the grand, sweeping narrative of life, is also a form of creation. In the smoldering, frozen ruins of the dinosaurs' world, a new chapter was about to begin. The cataclysm had reset the evolutionary clock. While the giants perished, other, smaller creatures endured. Hiding in burrows deep underground, shielded from the initial heat and the subsequent cold, were our distant ancestors. These were small, shrew-like mammals, creatures that had lived for millions of years in the shadows of the dinosaurs. They were adaptable, warm-blooded, and small enough to survive on insects, roots, and the scraps of a decaying world. For them, the apocalypse was an opportunity. The death of their oppressors was the dawn of their own age. The darkness that starved the dinosaurs was the protective cloak under which they could emerge, explore, and diversify. The end of the Cretaceous period was the beginning of the Paleogene, and with it, the rise of the mammals. The fall of one dynasty created the vacuum that allowed another to flourish, a dynasty that would eventually lead to primates, and ultimately, to us. The story of that day, 66 million years ago, is therefore more than just a tale of destruction. It is a profound and humbling reminder of our own place in the cosmos. It highlights the staggering fragility of life and the immense role that contingency plays in the history of our planet. One random impact on one single day irrevocably altered the course of evolution, paving the way for human consciousness to eventually arise and ponder the very event that made its existence possible. It begs us to look at our own world, at the interconnectedness of our own ecosystems and ask a sobering question: what can this ancient apocalypse teach us about the precariousness of our own future and the responsibility we bear as the current custodians of this resilient yet fragile blue marble?